Hello, I'm Volker from Transver, and I'd like to welcome you to this webcast about the integration of business process and application level testing. First, let me introduce to you our company and its presenters. Transver AG is an independent software vendor. It's headquartered in Germany and has a US branch, Transver America Incorporated, Florida. We are doing global business with partners in consulting and software projects. Our focus is on the specialization in model transformations and test automation using BPM-X. And by the way, BPM-X is a registered trademark and software product of ours, of Transver. Today's webcast will be presented by Sascha Kappel from Product Consulting, and by me, Volker Rautenberg. I'm Vice President of Product Management. So let's go ahead and, as a warm-up, talk about some common situations in solution delivery, like ERP, legacy applications, and others. So one question that comes up very frequently is, why do we have such high testing efforts? It could be in the range of 20 and even up to 50% of a total budget. The answer normally is that there are traceability and media gaps between requirements on one hand side and test automation on the other hand side. Are business requirements, laws, and regulations actually met? Well, it's very important to have really a coverage of requirements and risks. This is essential to be tested on the business process level. Why do test preparation and test execution require so much time? The answer normally is that much time is wasted because there is too less automation in the test preparation and test execution phases. We have Word documentations from the system integrator how to automate our testing. Well, you could transform your Word documentation into process flows with requirements and interactions as the basis of automated test generation and execution. How could we manage testing for our global business processes with complex process and application interactions? Well, you should use your business process documentation and generate end-to-end test scenarios for test automation on application level. Let's go ahead. A very important thing is to consider both sides, business and IT. On the business side, we typically have roles like business analyst, requirements, risk managers, and their goal is to scope a business solution in terms of requirements. They have to take into account regulations, compliance, they capture functional and end-to-end processes, and of course, they listen to change requests. On the other hand side, on the right-hand side, we have the application team, application engineer. This team is responsible for the delivery in terms of parameterization, customizing, and in general developing the solution. Of course, they also have to take into account change requests. So this is actually the critical transition from business to IT. In between, there is the test team represented by a test engineer. And the important task here is, of course, to care about a really good alignment between business and applications that support the business. Our answer from Transver side is model-based testing to make this alignment really happen. How do we connect processes with application testing? As a matter of fact, process flow documentation does not go beyond any details of a business activity. On the test execution side, we typically have to run application forms, and this requires application form level details. However, these details are not captured within process flows. We have to deal with complexity. Process flows typically contain many business activities. And of course, it's very difficult and hard to oversee how the business processes and the execution on application level are really linked what is the relation between them. So this tiny screenshot, it's been taken for a rather moderate process flow, depicts an end-to-end test case, and well, it doesn't look very simple, but imagine you have to supply all the application level information. That's not an easy task. So the challenge is, how can we make the integration between business and application level easier? Let's talk about the orchestration of automated end-to-end test execution. You see this side of business process modeling, and we have different levels to consider here. Levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down to level 6, which is typically outside the scope of business process modeling. On the upper levels of business process modeling, levels 1 to 3 typically, we have a functional decomposition. Imagine that on the highest level, level 1, you have rough distinctions between core, management, and support processes. On level 2, for instance, we talk about supply management or financials. Level 3 would, for instance, be procurement management or accounts receivable. So this is merely a functional decomposition. However, when we move to the levels 4 and 5, we really get to business flows. So on level 4, we talk about business processes like procure and pay. On the level 5, for instance, we have activities like prepare requisition, prepare request for quotation, or make payment. So the overall goal of this automation example we'd like to demonstrate to you actually is to automate a procure to pay on a global enterprise level. Okay, so first of all, we start with a business process model. We have different process levels, and the real business activities, they are going to happen on level 5 in this example. So they are represented on the right-hand side by different blocks which carry the L5 notation. On the application level, which is beyond the process documentation, we, for instance, have an application AGS providing application forms A and B that support the business activities. Additionally, there could be an application Y bringing in a form C, an application form C. And when we look in this demonstration at Katalon Studio, in order to test form A, we have a test case provided in Katalon Studio. Same is true for form B and for form C. The forms A, B, and C are actually supporting the business activities captured in a process flow model. And here actually the link, the orchestration is happening. So for real business activities on level 5, for instance, it could happen that we just have a single form to use which supports the level 5 activity, or we have several forms that support this, or different business activities get back to a single application form. So how to achieve this orchestration? This will be shown in the live demonstration part of today's webcast. The relevant information for Katalon will actually be created as test suites, which embrace different sequences of test cases in Katalon Studio. Let's have a very brief look at the methodical aspects at different levels. You can see the typical tester's double V model. On the left-hand side, we have different kinds of models from lowest levels, the unit level, going up to system requirements and user requirements in general when it comes to validation of a business application. On the right-hand side, we have mostly software artifacts On the low level, these are units, could be very small portions of software, components, subsystems, integrated systems, and finally we have an operational system. The use case and showcase we'd like to demonstrate today is on the lower right-hand side, so we focus on units, think of them as forms, and components. Okay, so the transition from business to IT actually starts with business process flow models like the one shown here. The business activities, which are represented as blue rectangles in the process flow, they are supported by application forms shown exemplarily on the right-hand side. So for instance, the business activity prepare requisition is supported by a web dialog prepare requisition, and the same is true, for instance, for prepare request for quotation, which is supported by a corresponding web application dialog prepare request for quotation. So what the test team actually has to do in order to run process-driven test cases is to enter data and to execute really the tests in the web application. So you can see different fields where the test team can enter data, and you have buttons so they can push in order to make things happen for testing. Okay, let's talk about the orchestration of end-to-end testing. This slide is showing a typical end-to-end business process test case that has been generated by BPM-X software. So it has a start event on the left-hand side and an end event on the right-hand side. In between, we have a lot of business activities that are supported by the application. So for each business activity, for each blue rectangle, we have an application, and we have test cases for these applications, or more precisely for these application forms. So each business activity, blue rectangle in the process flow, is supported by an application form. However, the question, even for a small example, is who can oversee all the test cases derived from the process flow, and who is going to develop the test data for these test cases. It is good to have an automation for this. Okay, with Katalon Studio, you're able to manage your test cases on an application forms level. So on the left-hand side of this screenshot, you can see two test cases testing two different forms. The one is prepare request for quotation, the other is prepare requisition. Each test case has a sequence of test steps. You can see it on the right-hand side of the screenshot. So it starts with the open browser, navigate to URL, set some text, that means enter some data to the form, and finally a button is pushed and the browser window is closed. So this is how a typical test case and application form test case is looking like in Katalon Studio. End-to-end testing on application level is only meaningful if we know which business decisions have been taken along a process path at gateway or decision symbols. Or in other words, we need to know the conditions that apply for a specific process level test case. Such metadata about conditions can be provided at the outgoing connectors in a business process model. And BPM-X software is able to evaluate this information and show it, for instance, in an Excel report like this one. The so-called precondition information in this report gives you the means to create the according test data that assures that exactly this process level test case is addressed. So how do you read this precondition? So actually you have two different rows here, row number 7, row number 8. They are both equivalent formulations that exactly address the test case depicted at the lower half of this Excel sheet. So we have different steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And above, we have logical conditions that exactly denote this test case from the process level perspective. So exactly this test case is defined by the following condition. The estimated price must be lower than 10,000. Has critical item must not be true, that is, must be false. Is invoice authorized, must not be true. Is quote accepted manually, must not be true. And we have the condition that the quoted price must be greater than the estimated price considered within a 10% limit, that is by a factor of 1.1. An alternative formulation of the precondition for this test case would be this lower row, which has one additional condition here, but both of these conditions are equivalent. So you could return to either the upper or the lower row here. And this is a very meaningful way and very important thing, in fact, so that you can define your test data that has been derived from the process model, given the fact that you have provided the necessary metadata in the process model. Okay, so what are the tools to connect business process level and application level testing? First, we'd like to demonstrate Katalon Studio. Typically, we already have developed test cases on the application form level there. Next, we have BPM-X software. On the one hand side, it is generating process level end-to-end test cases. And on the other hand side, it is generating the test suites and the test suite collections for Katalon Studio. In other words, it is providing the orchestration for Katalon Studio. The single end-to-end process path becomes a test suite in Katalon Studio. All end-to-end paths of a process become a test suite collection in Katalon Studio. So let's now move ahead to the showcase. It's about the automation of test case definitions and the execution for business processes and application testing. The tools which are involved are Microsoft Visio. It will provide the business process, and Katalon Studio. The showcase actually has several steps. First, we begin with a Visio flowchart. It is depicting a business process with corresponding business activities. Second, we have prepared a mock-up web application which supports the business processes with corresponding application forms. We have Katalon Studio test cases already recorded, which will be used for the execution on application forms level. We'll then look at the Visio flowchart with added test case information per business activity. The BPM-X converter software then will generate the Katalon Studio test suites and collections. And finally, we'll demonstrate the test execution of all generated end-to-end process level test cases on application level in Katalon Studio. Okay, so this is now the right time to stop sharing the screen from my side, and I would like to hand over to Sasha.
Thank you. I will share my screen and we will start on the level of our business process flow. This is a simple process flow, but as you can see, we have our activities here, the blue rectangles, and we have the decisions. We can run several paths. We can run the yes or the no path. And as you can see, we have several decisions here. That means the sum of the possible paths in this process flow can sum up very fast. So our activities have some metadata, as you can see here. And also we are covering sub-processes. We can see here a so-called sub-process, which has behind another process. Let's jump to it. Okay, let's zoom a little bit out. And you can see, okay, this sub-process contains, again, activities, decisions, etc. Then we run back, come back here to the upper level, and run here through the end event. So several paths are possible here. So I will now show you how we match these activities here from the process flow to the real application level. Therefore, let's have a look on this menu here. This is our mockup menu. And as you can see, for each business activity in our process flow, we have one form here available. Let's have a look on the first one. Okay, it has a text, it has some text boxes, and we can press the order or cancel button. So each of those business activities are represented in the application by a form. Okay. And our objective is to automate the testing of each application form. Therefore, we use Katalon Studio. In Katalon Studio, you will see on the left-hand side a tree, and within this tree, we will now have representation for each business activity, or let's say for each form we have to test on application level. Okay, on the left-hand side, we can see the test cases, and we have for all available business activities, here our evaluate RFQ, etc., and also the activities of the sub-process by reverse decomposition added to our resulting test suite and test suite collection we can have a look later on. At first, I want to show you a simple functionality of this tool. Let's have a look inside this test case here. Okay, what is it doing? It opens a browser, navigates to a URL, do a click, set text, do a click, and close the browser. Okay, let's see how simply we can create such a test. I will delete this one, quickly recreate it by using the record web functionality of Katalon Studio. Okay, we will start on our mockup menu. Let's start the record process. Okay, I will now do the first step. I will click here my form. Okay, now we are at the form. In the next step, I want to enter some text. In the next step, I want to enter another text. I will give a click on the order button, and then I will simply close my form and press on the stop record button. In the next step, I can save this new test case to my inventory by clicking OK and give it a name. It is evaluate RFQ. Okay. Let's move it here to our substructure. Okay. And then let's have a look how it looks like when we execute this test. Now the steps will be run and it will open a browser, navigate to click, enter text. Okay, it opens the browser, jumps to the form, enters the text, and closes the browser. As simple as that. We will now go to the part, how do we build a bridge between the business activities on the process flow and on the other hand side, on the tests in Katalon Studio. Okay. So let's have a look again on our metadata of our business activities. On the right hand side, when you have a look at the MPT execution hints, you can see a path, a relative path to test cases, MPT demo app, and prepare requisition. And this is exactly the path within the Katalon Studio project where our test case for this specific form is located at. Let's have a look here. For this one, it is this path to the inform requester test in Katalon Studio, and so on. So each business activity has a test for each form in Katalon Studio. With this link, we create a connection, and in the next step, we will now create the test suites and the test suite collections, as already mentioned before in the presentation, by using our converter tool. Let me close this one here and open our application. Here we have a web-based converter tool. It's hosted in Transware and it's secured by HTTPS. And you have simply to log on, and then you can start to create, based on your business process, the test suites and the test suite collections for Katalon Studio. I have to give a configuration file to this tool, and I have to add a description. Okay, Visio to Katalon, let's process. Now the converter reads what is inside the configuration, which possible tasks can be performed. In our case, we want not to run to HP, to Jira, etc. Today, we want to create test suite and test suite collections in Katalon. Okay. Now, the converter reads again which parameters are needed to do this task. We have two ones. The first one is, where's our business process? This is this Visio file located on my desktop. The next step, I have to choose the so-called model-based testing coverage level. It's starting by C0 and it's going up to C5, and the higher the coverage level, the higher the amount of tests produced. I take C2 coverage level and press run. And the converter tool is reading the Visio, processing it, and generating the test suite and test suite collection set for Katalon Studio. Okay, here we see it's running. And I think it takes only a few seconds. I will give it a refresh to check the status. So we can now download the results to our desktop and load into Katalon Studio. Those artifacts have simply to be copied to the test suites and test suite collection subfolder of my project. It's done. So I will open Katalon, will close it, and reopen it so we can see immediately the result in Katalon Studio. So on the one hand side, we have tests created for each form. And now we will see how those tests are structured into test suites, and how these test suites, which are representing end-to-end paths, are structured into test suite collections, which are representing all end-to-end paths for our business process. Let's scroll a little bit down here to reach the section. And here we have our test suite section. Okay, what we can see here, we have a test suite collection. Let's double click it. What's inside? Okay, inside we have 3 test suites, those ones. Let's have a look inside one test suite. Okay, so we will start with the start event. Then we execute the test for the prepare requisition form. Then we execute the test for prepare request for quotation. Then we have a decision, and we go to the evaluate RFQ until we run finally to an end event. And now we have 3 paths generated through our process flow, which we have summarized here as test suites. As next step, let's have a look how it looks like when we finally execute it. That means I will jump back to my test suite collection and say, okay, I want to execute it, and press here the button. And then we start with the first test suite. And as you remember, the first test suite has 8 steps and is executing all the activities which are in the sequence of this test suite. It will now open the browser, open the specific form, types text, press the button and closes again. And now it will do this again for the next prepare requisition activity. Okay, now we have the third one, evaluate RFQ, which we have re-recorded some minutes ago. Okay, the next form has been tested. Okay, and here you can see in the log viewer, this one, the first test suite of this test suite collection, has successfully tested and executed. Now it jumps to the second one. Okay, so in principle, it's clear how we match the business process activities with our real forms for our application. I will stop the screen sharing and we will proceed with the slide presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Sasha. I'll present my screen. Is it visible to you?
Yes.
Very good. So let me go ahead and summarize the key takeaways. So it's very important from the experience we have demonstrated to you that you could leverage your system models, be they already existing business process flows, be it documentation as Word documents for blueprints, for instance. And it's very important to use these system models as a single point of truth. What is the benefit of this approach? You will not have redundant test models to be maintained in other products. That means you have quicker turnarounds in agile development and, of course, in the subsequent iterations of regression testing. The next item, the next takeaway is the reuse of the existing tool landscape of modeling requirements and testing tools. So the benefit is there is no additional tool training, and you can really focus on the methodology of testing and the automation of test cases. You have an integration of your existing modeling tools with testing tools in your software development lifecycle and in your software landscape, system landscape. The benefit is you have sustainable investments in existing tools, in existing configurations, and very important, in the know-how related to these. The next takeaway is that we are able to really generate end-to-end test cases directly from process flow, with also risks and requirements included, and that's very important to underline, to orchestrate the execution automation. The benefit of this is you have a real and measurable increase of quality of your test case design and much lower efforts for test case generation and execution. Finally, you can maintain the test relevant metadata directly in the system model, that means in the process flow model. And this implies as a benefit the knowledge transfer from business to IT, and very important, the traceability of requirements. So to sum it up even in a more condensed way, the BPM-X technology that is backing this solution approach, it is agnostic of tools and modeling languages. It definitely connects to existing modeling and testing tools. It automates the generation of test cases and test data. And very important, it provides the orchestration for test automation tools. If you're interested in more information, you should please have a look at our website, transverag.com. You could also look at our blog entries at blog.transverag.com. You may also wish to look at YouTube, where we have a channel, user BPM-X GmbH, and finally at SlideShare Transver. Thank you very much for having taken the time to look at this webcast, and goodbye.